Our Father in heaven, we rejoice before you this day, that we may come again tonight to bring you glory, and that we may come again tonight to worship before you and to say you are good and you have been good to your people. Our Father, we thank you that you have put us in relationship with you and with the world, that you have put us in relationship with one another. And we ask, Father, that we would be of sharp mind tonight and of gentle heart, that we might learn how better to love you and to love one another, that we might care for this creation, that we might resist evil and do good, that we might bring justice and peace. Our Father, we pray that you would guide our thoughts and our words this night, that the meditation of our heart and that the words of our lips might be pleasing to you. Father, exalt yourself on high, that we might be drawn to you and glorify you throughout all our days. For this we ask in Jesus' name and for his glory. Amen. So a couple weeks ago, we started looking at relationships, and it was really just the first lecture I was painting in very broad brush strokes. So number 2, this is lecture 2, and painting very broadly and sort of highlighting what I thought was at least the most broad and universal scale for what does it mean to be a human in a relationship. And I highlighted there were particularly 4 centers or loci of relationships within the human experience. As humans, we're in a relationship with God. We're in a relationship with spiritual beings. We're in a relationship with the creation. And we're in a relationship with one another. Now, when we use the word relationship, we generally have in mind and think about peer-to-peer, human-to-human. We normally are thinking about marriages and parenting and friendship and employees and employers and coworkers and neighbors and business associates and politics and things of that nature. And that is all true and will be, in fact, the focus of this study over the next several weeks. But I wanted to make the point initially and just remind you of this point tonight, that those relationships don't happen in a vacuum. The reason for reminding us that as humans, every human is in a relationship with God, is that that relationship colors and shapes our relationship with one another. Likewise, as humans, we are all in a relationship with the heavenly beings and the spiritual beings, dark and demonic and bright and heavenly. And that relationship likewise influences and colors our experience with one another. And then thirdly, we are likewise in a relationship with creation. And that relationship too influences and shapes our relationship to one another. So while the study, I think rightly, will be focused on relating to each other as fellow humans, there needs to be this infiltration or penetration of the ideas that we're never humans in a relationship in a void. There is also a divinity, a creation, and spiritual beings in which we are contending, and the environment in which we are having our relationship. Okay, does that make sense? Tonight, I also want to continue painting with the broad brush strokes and sort of continue to set the stage by then narrowing in on those human relationships and focus on maybe 4 categories or 4 types or loci of the human relationships. Not only do I appreciate symmetry, 4 broadly and 4 specifically, but I also found this taxonomy constructive for the rest of the study in terms of organizing where we're going to go. So if you don't like the taxonomy, tough, I'm the teacher. But also, I'm not going to fight you over it. It may have holes. it's for our purposes. This particular category, and the 4 categories I've come up with to organize human relationships, is based on the idea that all human relationships grow out of one central and essential principle, that we occupy space. That God, when he made Adam, made him of the dust of the ground and made him into a physical living being. And that we as humans occupy space. We take up space. And this is really the ground and then the motive for our relationships with others in a very real, concrete sort of way. In order to have a relationship, I need to occupy space, you need to occupy space, and we need to share space. And it's at that intersection that you have space and I have space and we have space that we suddenly have a human relationship. It is that need to share that space. What is more, it's remarkable to consider that there's no human being who's ever existed apart from the sharing of space. In fact, every human being, except for the first two, have come into the world in an invasion of someone else's space. This is what we call pregnancy. Humans do not come into existence in the dark corners of creation. Humans do not come into existence in some far-off place. Humans exist by invading, at the beginning, someone else's space. And that remains true. There is no adult who has suddenly outgrown the need to share space with other humans. That from the beginning, we need to invade someone else's space in order to maintain our own. And we need to share space with one another in order to maintain our own. It reminds me of the 2004 film Spanglish, which I've never seen, but I have seen one scene at the end many, many times. I heard about it and went and looked it up and kind of got hooked on it. It's this remarkable moment in this life of a single mom, a Mexican immigrant to America, of whom I know almost nothing. She worked, because I haven't seen the movie, for some rich, Caucasian, upper middle class American. When she left that job, she withdrew her young daughter from the private school. And this precipitated this moment of conflict where the young daughter, discovering her exciting new role in America, did not want to continue in the shadow of her immigrant single mom. They stand at the bus stop, and as the mother goes to draw near to her daughter sticks out her hand, and in a lesson she has learned from her American counterparts, she says, "No, Mom, I need my space." I don't know if this is the way all Mexican moms are, but she went marching across the space that remained, planted her face in her daughter's face, and said, "No space between us." This is the bedrock principle of human relationships. That there is no space between us. There is a triangulation between my space, your space, and our space. And everything else is just details. Everything else is just the nub and the grit and the grind of working out how my space, your space, and our space work together. There are obligations and shapes to this triangulation. It's not just a triangle. In fact, it takes this myriad of things that often the human dynamic is referred to as a dance, because there is this moving and this changing and this flowing. So the four that I see emerging from this fact, that there is this space that we interface with, this need to share it, this need to be shaped by it, that emerge are political, economic, the economic, which, by the way, is something of a misnomer, but we'll go over that later tonight, interpersonal, and then last, familial. And I'll explain what I mean by these categories. As I mentioned, I won't die on this hill. And what is more, I wasn't actually totally happy with the names I came up with. But we'll work with them. Before I launch into these four, any questions or thoughts about just that opening concept? We are spatial beings, and that is one of the essential foundations of human relationships.
When you say space, you don't necessarily mean physical space.
Correct. It'd be more broad than that. At a minimum, it is truly physical space. If you think about it, all your relationships, except for the ones Facebook convinces you have, actually have to occupy a physical space of some limitation. But yeah, I do mean it in also a metaphorical sense of emotional space, intellectual space, etc. Yeah. Yeah, that there is, within the sense of space, it is that which I possess. So my space can include my property, my talent, my insight, my wisdom. Sure. Okay? So to begin to look at how this shapes our relationships and how it creates obligations in our relationships, first, the political idea. Politics at its core is about the proper use of power in order to maintain peace in the public space. Yes, I worked to get all those P's in there. The proper use of power to maintain peace in the public space. That there is a space that does not belong to you or to me, but to us. It is a shared space, and that's what we call a public space. It is by definition not belonging to any one party. And in today's society, the immediately evident one, and I'm borrowing here from Jane Jacobs, who has some great work on life and death in the great American cities, things of that nature. The quintessential moment of public space in a city like Cambridge is the sidewalk. And pretty much, I have found that in my 18 months on Antrim Street, about 95% of my relationship with my neighbors takes place on the sidewalk. It is the public space. It is the safe space. It's not my sidewalk, although when it snows on Tuesday, it's my sidewalk. On any other situation, it is not their sidewalk or my sidewalk. It is our sidewalk. It is a public space. But power is necessary to be exercised in human relationships, for that space is easily abused. Do I need to prove that to anybody? And so power is necessary to limit human intervention. It is necessary to coerce moral and respectful behavior within those shared spaces. If we as humans are going to have a sidewalk we all like, then someone is going to have to be in charge of it. Now, for this peace to prevail on Antrim Street, the humans must be persistently operating as is designed. The sidewalk is only as successful as those who don't roll their ankles going down it. It is only as successful as the little, carts going up and down the street can actually make it up and down the street. The degree to which the tree roots have taken over, the degree to which, the sidewalk is thwarted, and so our kids are parading up and down the street where the cars are, the sidewalk has failed, and it has no longer achieved its goal. The peace, the flourishing of the humans that are there is not achieved. But it must be a proper use of power. For humans to use their shared space in a free and thriving way, power must never be too little or too much. And this is a lot to ask of totally depraved creatures. Rather, it is a proper use of power. Humanity is designed to a degree to self-regulate. And all government and political relationships have to presuppose a degree of self-regulation. You can never govern humans enough. Don't believe me? Ask the parents who live with kids 24/7. You can't do it. There must be an element of self-regulation. But on the other hand, there must be an exercise of power because our ethics are incapacitated by our depravity. And so this gives rise to two particular relationships. When we speak about a political relationship, what we're really talking about is oppositional and cooperative relationships. And there's a degree to which, not just in the sense of government strictly speaking, but we may speak of human relationships in a political sense, meaning that they are oppositional or cooperative. Both obligate individuals to self-sacrifice. That in order to have a space that we call ours, but never mine, we must have oppositional and cooperative relationships. Any guesses which one is dominating DC right now? Between oppositional and cooperative. There is a need in human relationships to be oppositional. And we don't like that as much, do we? Well, I know some of us do. But not all of us enjoy confrontation. And yet there's a healthy need in human relationships to have oppositional people in our lives, to have contention and conflict. It obligates us to self-sacrifice. But similarly, those relationships must have a cooperative element, that there must also be mutual self-sacrifice for the good of others. The relationship, politically speaking, does best when it is mutual. When even in an oppositional position, we cooperate by agreeing on our sacrifices. So, why have shared space at all? I'll come back to that in a second. First, any thoughts on politics before I leave it? Yes?
It seems like, I guess political really brings up the connotation of having government regulated, but often it's also regulated by culture. I guess it's a bit of a subset in your sense of political here.
Yes, very, very good distinction. I'm operating with sort of that original sense of polis, the city, and the idea of these are the relationships that are necessary to preserve a shared space. And absolutely, that can be governmental, but it can also be cultural. It can also be like neighborhoods and things of that nature. There are other organizations and institutions that fall into this category. Yeah, very good. Yes?
Are you going to come back to this or keep referencing, or are we done with political?
Done with political forever? No, we're not done with politics forever. I'm pretty much done with it for tonight because I wanted to survey these broad brushes. I don't mean to cut you off, but
I'm not quite feeling done, but I don't know if you're going to go back or.
to consider politics in more in depth.
Yeah, I just don't have enough of what you said.
Okay.
But you can keep going. I'm just wanting to see where you're going.
Okay. Yeah. Where I'm going tonight is the idea of how space is shaping our relationship, and that we're as humans developing political relationships. And by that I mean, and I'm limiting it to relationships which govern our shared space. Okay? And yes, there's a lot more to flush out with that. Yes?
So would that include things like etiquette? Or is that somewhere else?
So etiquette, in a sense, in terms of a social etiquette among multiple parties and peers, not necessarily an interpersonal etiquette like what I would describe as manners. Not so much that'll come,
That's what it's.
under here. But social conduct in a group dynamics would certainly fall under like the political. Okay, so then as the question I raised at the end of that, why have shared space at all? So why not just live in our little hovels and our little private places? And the answer is that ultimately, from an economic standpoint, and again, I admit this is a bit of a misnomer, from the economic standpoint, human thriving is not possible without cooperation. Human thriving is not possible without the distribution and exchange of goods and services to maintain our existence. As a matter of fact, does anyone know what word is used to describe someone who provides all their economic goods and services to themselves? Self-sufficient. There's another one. Subsistence. What is sistence? Living. What is sub? Under. It is slightly less than living. Even within our nomenclature, even with our language, a self-sufficient existence is subsistent. It is less than living. It is less than life. The humans were designed to be in community and to exchange their skills and their gifts, to distribute and to give to one another their services and their goods. This both maintains our existence and also causes us to thrive. Now, this idea of distribution is the idea that I have something, but I need to give it to you. It needs to exit my space and enter your space. Or at a minimum, it needs to occupy our space, some sort of neutral shared space. Likewise, there must be an exchange. As a human, I am not infinite. I cannot give without end, without being resupplied. And so my services and my goods must be compensated for. If I am one who is distributing apples or time or insight, I will eventually run out of these things. And I need to be compensated accordingly in order to replenish it, in order to revive it. So in theory, I can present to you a limited number of sermons, a limited number of teachings. And you guys present to me a book allowance so that that number can perpetually grow, so that I can go and learn more and have more to say and not end up preaching the same thing Sunday after Sunday. There is this exchange in order to bring about something more than minimal living, something about thriving in our mutuality, in our specialization. By becoming individuals who let our space be influenced and infiltrated by others, by becoming humans who dare to enter someone else's space, we exchange and receive goods and services we ourselves could not produce and improve human existence, human flourishing. This too gives rise to two types of relationship. Just as the political had oppositional and cooperative relationships, that we must wrestle and contend with one another as well as work with one another, in economic relationships we have the benevolent and the competitive relationships. That on the one hand, human relationships in this sphere develop into one of generosity and kindness, the benevolent. That we give away our goods and services, perhaps freely, perhaps at a discount, perhaps for various other exchanges that are mutually advantageous. Or we have competitive relationships in which we contend with others, in which we say, my product's better, my product's cheaper, and we improve the world. Through the competition and through the benevolence, we make an attempt to have humans thrive, to have humans share with one another openly. Notice that like the political relationships, these two relationships obligate self-sacrifice. In order to be truly benevolent, I must give away goods. But in order to be truly competitive, I must likewise deliver the best product at the cheapest price. It requires self-sacrifice. These are relationships that are ordered around the singular principle that to share space, the driving urge and principle is self-sacrifice. I cannot share space unless I sacrifice self. I'm going to keep harping on that. You guys see where I'm going? So the shared or public space pushes us into political and economic relationships. It pushes us into this systemic order in which we share and inherit very much from long ago the principles and the practices of our day and age. But they are ones that are all ordered over the success depends on self-sacrifice. Any thoughts on the economic or economic and political together? Yes.
Can you define the benevolent economic relationship again?
So benevolent economic is releasing goods and services at a hurt to myself in order to just benefit someone else, to inflate one's position. Whereas the competitive, part of it is looking at a different person. So I may have a benevolent relationship with a customer, but I have a competitive relationship with my fellow business owner who's in the same sphere that I'm in. So it's not necessarily the same category of person that we're describing. Yeah.
But ideally, a benevolent economic relationship wouldn't actually be sacrificial, right? If you're looking at a provider and a customer, ideally it's that the customer is giving something that is less valuable to them than what they're getting, and the provider is getting something that is more valuable to them than what they're giving.
Correct. Yeah, ideally there would be gain or net zero, some sort of that kind of exchange. By calling it benevolent, I'm focusing more on just good-willed.
Okay.
And so again, sort of that original sense of benevolent. I don't necessarily mean charitable,
Right.
or in our modern sense of charity again, but rather good-willed, that it is a free exchange of these goods and services. Yeah, good clarifying point. Thank you. Daniel.
So it's the political, you said the need to, you said something about how the political necessitates the economic?
What I had said is, why even bother, with the political relationships? Why even have shared space? And the answer is because both of these create systems of thriving. Ideally, we're constructing politically and economically systems and orders of human relationships that result in all humans thriving.
So as far as economic relationships, where are you drawing the boundaries? Because, for instance, parents definitely give things to their children, but that doesn't seem like a commercial transaction.
Correct. The boundaries that I'm operating with here is these two are going to be systemic and imposed by the nature of shared space. These two, to a greater or lesser degree, are voluntary and interpersonal. Okay? At least the initiation on these are voluntary. They don't always remain voluntary. So these are systemic and not super voluntary. You don't necessarily get to choose your political system or your economic system. You kind of inherit what's left to you. Yeah.
Is there also some notion that the first two govern the relationships between strangers, or are you define that?
It could be greater or lesser degrees of strangers, although that's kind of a Western idea. For instance, medieval village, they had political and economic relationships where there were no strangers. They knew everybody and everybody's grandpa.
Right, it's more the point that those things should work even if I don't know you or care about you.
Yeah, these are going to also be public. And that might be more the word I would use in that situation. That these are operating in the public sphere, in the shared space that exists in a human civilization, in a human society. These, again, are going to be, more of private. Yeah, good questions. Jake.
Is it fair to characterize what we've said so far under kind of two axioms that shared space is beneficial for everyone, right? There's a net benefit as number one, and also number two, those benefits come only from self-sacrificial relationships?
Yes, that's the thesis I'm driving toward.
Okay, all right,
yeah.
all right.
The human thriving only exists in shared space, and shared space only happens with self-sacrifice.
Right.
That becomes the ethical impulse.
Which seems strange, right? I'm going to join a society or a shared space so that I can sacrifice, so that I can flourish. It seems as if you have to sacrifice to flourish, you could just get rid of both of them and be fine, be self-sufficient, right? Which obviously, I'm assuming that's not the case. That's not the point of where you're going.
Right, and there's two considerations. One is you're presupposing the other is even possible. And my introduction was, it's impossible. You're going to be in a human civilization. It's, you came into the world invading someone's space. You're always going to be sharing space. So the question is what are you going to do with that fact? What are we as humans going to do with that fact? It also remains fascinating that the nature of the gospel is that self-sacrifice is the way to human flourishing. Even though it doesn't sound very appealing to sort of an Adam Smith-esque, self-interest.
Right. So when you say a transaction is benevolent and yet it encourages flourishing, is what you're really saying that in the larger scheme of things, everyone is helped, but in the immediate transaction, I give something up because there's something else that I get. Is that kind of wrapped up in what you're saying?
Yeah,
Because otherwise I'm not sure why anybody would engage in a benevolent transaction, a regular human being.
would engage in a benevolent transaction.
One where I'm sacrificing something. Unless there's something else that I'm getting.
Right. And the something else being the flourishing of a human civilization, the well-being of humanity at large.
So would it be like, for example, the Puritans say they believed in public education because having educated neighbors was good for everybody, even if it cost me something in the short term?
Yes.
Maybe it would help to have an example. Like, are you thinking of goodwill business transactions that end up being mutually beneficial, or are you thinking of true acts of altruism and charity?
No, yeah, that's what I was trying to clarify with Jake. I'm thinking the first, simply the goodwill exchange between goods and services of humans for mutual benefit and gain and so on. But of course, within that, as a subset, can be just true altruism. Yeah, philanthropy can be a subset within it, but I'm envisioning it as a broader economics, measure.
So then the other category is those where I seek to take from you for my gain and for loss.
Yeah, a competitive relationship where I seek to do better than you. I seek to best you. Yeah. Okay, Ari and Jeremy?
I guess I'm struggling with this works when everyone is doing it, right? That we can all be in our space and live enjoyment. And that's impossible. So I think I'm struggling with the, just the bottom line. I feel like you can't make this argument without assuming we're in a perfect world or that everyone is trying to have the same game. And since we're not, I don't know how to even have that.
I think what I'm trying to present is an ethical ideal to which we are aiming as humans. I agree that we're going to fall short and that we always do.
An ethical idea which we should aim as humans, all humans should aim for this,
Yes.
and all humans are capable of aiming for this.
Are all humans able of self-sacrifice? Yes. But not on a consistent basis. We need the gospel to be sure. Yeah, not in an absolute sense, in a relative sense. But I mean, is the ethical standard for our societies love? Is not the commandment of Christ for all human relationships that you love one another? I'm just using the code word self-sacrifice. My conclusion is going to be that this is all pointing us to the idea that no human relationship is going to work unless it's love. The reason our political relationships fail is because we don't love each other. The reason our economic systems fail is because we don't love each other. And that these systems will not succeed without love.
In our current system, though, if you are, let's say, benevolent, but everybody else is, competitive, it's not, I mean, in a heavenly sense, it's different, but in an earthly sense, you can be benevolent forever. If the other side is always being competitive, it will all, like, you will be run over, right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying competitive is immoral or wrong. I'm not creating a positive and negative. Just like the political, oppositional is good, cooperative is good. And just so similarly in the economic, benevolent and competitive are both good and both abused.
But in benevolence, you have self-sacrifice, which is
Well, and in competition, you have self-sacrifice. I mean, how does one business beat another business? They do the job better, cheaper. They self-sacrifice. I had Jeremy lined up, and I saw Christian's hand.
Yeah, it's just, I guess I got caught up in the word benevolent also.
Mm-hmm.
And also the word self-sacrifice. And what you were saying about, points of love, I think that kind of was what I was thinking too, in terms of, like, if it weren't, I'm not sure the word benevolent, like, I still am struggling with that word.
Sure.
I guess what I'm thinking is that you can't, like, the opposite of a functioning economic relationship or a functioning political relationship is when you just take, when you just invade, right? And if God weren't in the picture, there were no morals, then there wouldn't be this relationship because you would just take if you're more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But because God is in the picture, because there is love, so you are willing to give something instead of just taking.
Right.
But I guess I don't see it as benevolence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. That's fine. We can come up with a different word if you want to. I'm operating with, I need a word to work with, and the reason I like benevolent is because it's based on the Latin bene, good, volent, will. It's a good-willed relationship. It's a positive relationship. I've been trying to avoid this word, but it's a free exchange. It's a free, you're not coerced to exchange these goods. You're not obligated to exchange these services, but rather it's a goodwill exercise. But yes, in our society, benevolent is usually restricted to philanthropy, altruism, etc. And I'm just trying to use it in a broader sense. I had Christian and then.
So, just to carry your concern, in a vacuum, the benevolent economy isn't stable. Like, it would reward those who try to exploit the system. That's why you can't have an economy in a vacuum with these laws. That's to keep people, find a way to punish so that their objective punishment. Because if I become greedy, then I run afoul of the system. So you do need some sort of
Some sort of interaction between the political and the economic. The political, which exercises power, and again, be that cultural, social influence, or actual legal and judicial oversight, as well as then over the economic relationship. Okay. So.
Is it fair to say you're kind of laying out the primary colors here, and most societies are blends, or like going as later?
Point E is complexities.
Okay, cool. So
But we're not going to get there tonight.
if we're not fitting into the exact mold, because they're primary colors and we're somewhere in the middle.
Right. The idea is that all human relationships exist in a merger of all these things.
Yeah.
And that there is no human relationship that can be entirely isolated. But for an intellectual exercise, I'm trying to draw out the essential features of these different categories in order to provide us with a little bit of context for the rest of the conversation. Yes?
So maybe to expand on this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, this here is not an argument or a single system that you're outlining for how a society would look. This is just a tool for categorizing different flavors of relationships or different aspects of any relationship.
Yeah, that was my intention, was to provide something of a language that we could use, a taxonomy, a bit of category, where there are relationships that are political, and there are relationships that are economic. There are relationships that are interpersonal and familial. And these each four, as a category, have a different salient feature or emphasis.
So our society, you can break down, you can spot the political and the effective and the ineffective political and economic and interpersonal relationships we see. But also in pathological societies, there are maybe an overabundance of competitive economic relationships and a lack of effective political relationships, but it still falls under this taxonomy. I think this is kind of addressing, or trying to address maybe what you were asking about.
Is there a philosopher that you're starting from?
A philosopher that I'm starting from? I don't think so. Okay? So that's the systemic, the public, political, and economic relationships. I'll try and attack the private ones, see what happens here, see if we can work our way through it. Interpersonal relationships. The salient feature here is that they are voluntary coexistence for mutual improvement and or enjoyment. They're not exchanges of goods or services across a public space, nor are they exercises in authority and power to maintain peace, but rather they're elective interactions. They're non-systemic. They're individualized. They're what we call friendship, for the most part. These are the relationships that are a coexistence, shared activities, shared conversations, habits, intentions, motives. It is the intersection of the human will and appetite in order for humans to thrive together. It is for mutual improvement or enjoyment. This giving up of my space, this sharing of our space, this exchanging of these things together is something that is either or both, but must be mutual, even if unperceived. Sometimes these friendships can feel very lopsided. Sometimes these relationships can seem at great tension. But there must be a mutuality for them to be sustained. How many of you have been in a relationship that over time disintegrated? Nothing went wrong. There was no conflict. It just stopped. The intersection and the interface between the humans went away. Perhaps there was a move. We relocated. Perhaps there was a shift in lifestyle. There's perceived, certainly within evangelical churches, this certain threshold that we call marriage and children. And there's this habit in evangelical churches that when you cross that threshold, you're not welcome in the youth group anymore or whatever, or vice versa. The youth group don't hang out with the married people. And it becomes this awkward tension in this very structured church system. But there is something that transcends all that. Friendships that we can have, elective relationships where we interact with people. And again, within these friendships, there is this obligation for mutual sacrifice, for mutual gain. Again, unperceived by some. I remember very well visiting a gentleman in his 80s, week after week, and in a nursing home. And it starts out with this rather, grand vision of being a good pastor and going to, hang out with this guy. And as you go and you listen to his stories and you tell him some of your stories, you begin to realize as the time goes by, you're getting more out of it than he is. And you begin to realize that there was this epic misunderstanding of what you had to offer as a human being and what he had to offer. Now, of course, he considers it a great relationship as well, as he enjoys the companionship and the friendship. But there is this reality that as humans, we have something to offer on the interpersonal level. We have something within our thoughts and in our feelings, within our ambitions, that are of benefit to others. And that within friendship, we can actually construct a relationship that is worth having. These interpersonal, non-systemic relationships are at this level voluntary. We enter them, we break them. We create them, and we hurt them. And so there is a burden that rests on us. They are not necessarily inevitable, although Disney might teach us otherwise. They are things that also require effort. There is a cultivation necessary for this to be maintained. If I'm going to have cycling friends, I have to keep cycling. But if it's going to be a friendship of remark and of renown and of note, then something other than cycling is going to have to end up matching us. What began the relationship, a shared hobby, a uniting of that space, is something that must also become transcendent. It must become greater than that event, and that the two parties would together have something between them, simply mutual interest. I actually like this person. Have you ever had people in your life like that? Where you hang out with that person because you just like that person. I married one. And you just enjoy that person. And so then the relationship grows from there. But marriage becomes something else, brings us to D, familial, but I won't jump into that just yet. Any thoughts briefly on interpersonal relationships. Yes?
Can you clarify that transcendent quality where people have to bond over something more than the shared interest? Because it would seem as if they were to remain in each other's space only for the sake of that shared interest, that would still be a suitable definition of an interpersonal relationship.
Yeah, I think so. I think, meaning I'm agreeing with that last conclusion, that is suitable for the definition of an interpersonal relationship. The emergent or transcendent quality is the idea of shifting into a friendship or a unique friendship where you're now invested not so much in performing an activity for which this person is beneficial, but you're invested in this person, himself or herself. And that's where we actually start to then apply the language of friendship.
So, since we're developing a taxonomy here, are you trying to draw a distinction between those two kinds of relationships, a friendship and a not friendship, and say that they fall in different sections of this taxonomy, or what's the importance of that distinction?
So friendship would be a subset of interpersonal, like oppositional and cooperative, like, yeah. And I never did come up with another one. It would be like
Interactional and transactional.
something like that. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So yeah, I was thinking coexistent and friendship. But it's one is doing something together, and the other one is actually being people who are together, and you have them do stuff.
I guess this makes me want to sort of circle back to the benevolent transaction in the economics here, because you gave the example of, you start this relationship with someone and you end up thinking you were going to give something, but then it turned out that you were actually getting something, and probably it's the same way. I mean, I think that to some extent that's true in the economic sphere too. You have two parties who, I perceive that, oh, you gave me such a great deal, and you perceive I got this, because I need what you have and you need what I have, and without them, I have extra something that I have too much of. So, the idea that it's a benevolent transaction is only from the other person's standpoint almost sometimes, that you're actually both getting something that makes you happier that you kept what you had.
Yeah,
that's what makes an economy work.
Right. Yeah, and in a lot of ways, that's what sustains friendships too, then. So to your point, there is this overlap of themes, that within human relationships, in a sense, we're describing it in sort of complex philosophical language or whatever. To give is better to receive. That there is an accrual to us of something good when we give, when we serve. Okay? Yes?
I don't know if this is entirely to your point, but the other bits of the taxonomy cover kind of negative mythologies, abusive political systems, etc. The interpersonal one, it seems like, goes from normal, sort of, at best, at worst, zero sum to positive sum, but doesn't cover strictly very negative interpersonal relationships, many of which also exist.
Yeah, I do think that if you're saying I didn't reference it, that's true. I didn't mention that fact.
My question is more, where does it fall in this understanding of interpersonal relationships?
I would say that within the category of interpersonal relationships, we have a lot of interpersonal relationships that are negative and that are hurtful. I certainly wouldn't deny that, yeah. Okay? So then the fourth and last category, the familial relationships. These are circumstantial and to a degree voluntary, but only in the initial sense for coexistence. They are what I'm limiting, and this is one name that I wasn't super happy with. By familial, I'm not limiting it to families in this way, but also neighborhoods, churches. There is a circumstantial or covenantal bind to these relationships By the neighborhood, we have geographical obligations. There is expectations put on us on Antrim Street by our virtue of being here. One I already alluded to earlier. We shovel the snow off the sidewalk. But there are other significant expectations that we're discovering. We are expected to be upset about the changes in Inman Square because that comes with the territory here. It's expectation of the neighborhood. Likewise, there are obligations within church societies, theological, doxological, and pietistic standards that we are to meet as we relate to one another. They are generally summarized in a confession, whether an explicit or secret one. It doesn't change the fact that all churches have standards. All churches have a confession by which we measure and hold each other accountable. Likewise, we have families, which begin with a voluntary choice. That begin with people agreeing to enter into the relationship. But these families become biological, legal, personal, and obligations are formed. And the obligations descend through the generations. What is more, the gifts and standards descend. And as the proverbial phrase goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. My mom's favorite quote. And so there is this understanding that the relationship within a family has circumstantial or involuntary components. And it is something of a systemic thing, but it is also and primarily an interpersonal thing. For families are constructed, churches and neighborhoods are constructed on sort of a covenant framework, that there are identity-driving associations which obligate our conformity to shared ideals or expectations. There's something of a pressure on us to see who we are in the lenses of these relationships. It's a fascinating thing to me to realize that throughout particularly the 20th century, Americans got into the habit of calling themselves Americans. It's actually something of a historical anomaly. Because prior to the 20th century, most Americans did not associate their primary identity with their nation, but with their state or their region. Likewise, today, we find scholarship remaining which emphasizes the idea that much of America's troubles, politically, economically, and even interpersonally, is because we have masked the fact that our identities are rooted in these covenant relationships. That as humans, we derive our sense of who we are from these associations. But because of these things that I have listed, these three in particular, neighborhoods, churches, families, are the three institutions that have experienced the most devastating ruins in the last 50 years. Americans are now shifting their identities to the political sphere or to the economic sphere. And now we have humans whose introduction to one another is, I am this job, I am that job. And now we have humans who are seeing the world primarily through the lens of, I am right, I am left, I am Democrat, I am Republican. And as we begin to associate with these relationships our primary identity, we begin to see the viciousness and the vitriol. Because there remains now a gaping hole at the center of the human experience, where families, churches, and neighborhoods once belonged. Notice also that those three institutions which once sat at the center of a human's understanding of his or her place in the world are the ones most close-knit geographically, at least historically. They're the ones that force the most sharing of space, the ones most demanding of self-sacrifice. This leads us then to the complexity of relationships. They are not isolated. They are not neatly categorized as we've done tonight, and as you guys have amply shown. They are not neat. They are human. They are messy. And so it draws us to the idea, and this is why this name is so bad, of oikos. When we speak of human relationships, we can speak of the fact that we have a relationship with the nation. We have a relationship with an economy. We have a relationship with our friends and our people around us. But ultimately, we exist in the fundamental building block of human civilizations, in oikos. We translate this as household. But really, in the Greek economy, it means all those relationships which pertain to the formation of an individual. Servants, co-workers, friends, neighbors. And an economy, then rightly done, produces a surplus that is shared with others. A surplus of peace, a surplus of wealth, a surplus of talent. And so within our networks and within our web of human relationships, we exchange and give the surplus of our oikos, of our relationships. The outflow of our work with one another brings about a thriving for others. And this, all these human communities have this web of responsibility, this web of privileges, and this web is held intact, I would argue, by love. And the degree to which we do not love, the responsibilities go unfulfilled and the privileges abused. The degree to which we do love is the degree to which these societies hold, these institutions stand. Any thoughts or questions on that, the last part? I snuck in. Yes, Daniel.
The thing that I'm trying to reconcile in my mind is the tension, or maybe there isn't one, between the competitive sides of some of these relationships and love. Because on one hand, the society seems to need these kinds of competitive relationships to exist in some ways for thriving. Maybe that's not even the ultimate goal, but supposing it is.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to need those competitive relationships to exist. Are those in tension with the goal of everyone should love everyone? Or
No, because I wouldn't conflate love with kindness or politeness. So just to use an example, that I can relate to. When I played with my brothers tackle football, we were very competitive and oppositional. But it in no way diminished or affected our love for each other. In fact, it increased it. And so I think there's a sense in which competitive or oppositional relationships are part of the human experience. And they are not fundamentally wrong, though they often go wrong. But they do not stand at odds with love. Because it's the same principle of confrontation. It's the same principle of correction. That in an oppositional relationship or in a competitive relationship, I'm actually forcing someone to do better, to clean up, to perform better. That can be easily misused, but it can also be done generously or kindly or with love.
I would argue that you had said that we've kind of gone away from the familial relationships and more into the political and economic identity. I guess I would argue that we may have changed what we consider familial, but I think we're still really familial in grouping, like, a lot more finding your identity in if you are gay. I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
group that feels familial, or your race, and that being familial. And I see what you were saying about the political and economic to a certain degree, but I feel like I think that those are still, can be, like, Democrat, Republican, becomes this is your group, and this is your neighborhood and your people.
Very good. That is very much what I was trying to communicate at any rate. That is largely what's happening in American civilization. That we will always, as humans, identify with the group that we derive our existence from, or think we do. And so the ones that man, I don't have the words for it, but that validate our existence, I guess would be maybe the way I say it. And so Yeah, within that group, those that affirm and validate our human existence, those are our family. And we derive our identity from them. Yeah, is that? I agree. Yes.
I think the word that you're thinking of is community, because Ari mentioned the gay people. There's the gay community. I know for other groups there might be the deaf community.
Mhm.
That's the word that tends to be used in seeking out a group that's not necessarily the family anymore, or the church, but even church, you can use that word, the church community as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, community is a good word for describing any kind of human group. That community, literally one with each other, being one, being of one association.
So I don't actually agree with what Ari's saying, but I think it's significant. He lives good.
That's it.
But I think what's significant about that is that shift is still moving from someone that you have a relationship to being your sort of natural, the person that you're sort of together with, to identifying yourself with somebody because both of you have the same enemy, whether it's race or sexual preference or politics. Now it's defined by, we're opposed to the same person, so we can be together.
Mm-hmm.
We have to pull together because those people are against us. That's not the way that a family works, unless it's the Hatfields and the McCoys. That isn't the impetus of a family relationship.
Right. Well, and I think part of it is linguistic. They see it as their family and say it is their family. Right. If we speak of family as a biological, covenantal, legal structure, it depends on how we're going to use the word family. If it is that covenantal, legal, biological dynamic, then what is prevailing in America is people are leaving off the biological, covenantal relationship as a source of identity and plugging into other communities which are now their families or being treated as their families. Is that?
Yeah, but I think it's also true that in some cases, the things, so like churches are starting to become not so much about their covenantal relationship as their being on this side of a political issue. So it's actually like we're staying in a unit, redefining what we're about.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that deliberately in here, but yeah, that churches would give, or even families would give up their place in this social order and become a political force or something like that. Yeah, there you go.
I guess if you're going to put churches in that familial, which you kind of but I feel like that we are. It's not about this is the only church in our neighborhood, and we all go to our one church. We go here because we believe in Jesus, and that is an identity thing, just as the homosexual or the people of color. Like that's an identity that you come together, not in opposition. Well, you could even say as Christians, like opposition to we are Christians and others are not. And so I guess I push that if we're going to put churches under familial, we don't operate in any of this that, like maybe we did 100 years ago, but where you're born in a certain neighborhood, you stay in that neighborhood, you go to the church that's there, and you're in a covenantal relationship with that community, with that church, with your family. I mean, we live in Jamaica Plain because I like the type of people who live there. That just means that it's my community, but it's also my community that I've chosen because I'm ideologically similar, which is tough nowadays because we all do that.
Yeah, these are each communities that are begun voluntarily today. Your marriage, where you live, where you go to church, are initiated voluntarily. But one thing I wanted to stay away from is actually calling them voluntary relationships, because we're actually under command from God to join a church somewhere. And also because once you marry, it's not voluntary anymore. But it is a good point that they begin voluntarily. I saw your hand then, Sylvia.
Yeah, you hear the phrase about family politics,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's the idea that there are other, well, and even church politics and all these categories, you can have the other aspects combined to it as well, and maybe as a family might become more political in how they would have interactions, as that would make people not necessarily feel as much of a community with their family, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
As it's more about who they are and being connected with each other, then I think that there's less politics involved in general, whether it's political, whether it's governmental politics or just how do you talk to this person, or it's not appropriate to say that to that, to that sibling or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good comparison because in the political sphere, you're using power to maintain peace. So if you speak of family politics, it's about how power, perhaps as Jeremy noted, cultural power, preserves the peace. But ideally in a family, the peace is preserved through other means, not an exercise of power.
I don't know if this is helpful comments, so feel free to just redirect. But just thinking about, I think we're often thinking about family as a Western immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
And family here meant something different from when Patrick and I went to the Philippines, and family was 300 Yanongs who came in from the mountains all together and hadn't seen each other in decades, but they were Yanongs, so they all got together and had meals, and just I feel like we're kind of breaking down and separating relationships which is a little easier in an individual Western mindset. When what we experience there, it's more family bleeds into everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of the communal accountability too. So I don't know. I'm wondering how this applies across outside of our Western context.
Well, I think within each society, they're going to have different shapes and it's going to be messy. I think even in our Western context, these categories are not always clear and fairly messy and hard to appropriate. One easy example is, am I Lydia's pastor or husband? And what's the relationship between those two offices? There isn't a clean way to do that. It's just messy. So I think the dynamic is that we are humans, and as humans, our relationships defy neat categories.
You were talking about the differences in kind of relationships that come about. You said that maybe some of them have broken down, or maybe they've been supplanted by others.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about ways to characterize that, one of them seems to be that more of our relationships are voluntary. We choose where we live and who we associate with it because we have things like cars.
Right. Airplanes. Yeah, we no longer are in a social order, a civilization in which we inherit space in the world that we must occupy and there isn't another space we can go to. Although there are remnants of that. Like even in our world, there are realities that we still simply inherit space in the world from our parents. Okay, we've run over. Sorry about that, but thank you. Good conversations, good engagement. We're going to end with 127A. 127A. And before we sing that, I will close this in prayer. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, thank you for putting us into community with one another. And thank you for bringing us into friendship with you. We pray, Father, that you would be with us this week as we go through all the relationships of life. We pray that you would strengthen and inspire and equip us, that in all of them we might bring glory to you. that in all of them we might walk humbly and holy before you. Father, be merciful to us, that we might go forth and serve you and bring you glory. For this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.